Recording in progress.
Hi guys, it's Julene with Joey Star Astrology. Welcome back. I'm here today, as promised, to talk about Saturn's retrograde in Pisces. But first, I want to talk about Saturn in Pisces because I didn't get a chance to do a video when Saturn ingressed into Pisces back on March 7th. And I actually have my Saturn, my natal Saturn in Pisces. So I've been studying a lot about Saturn and Pisces for these last months. And, in good Piscean and Neptunian form, if there is a form to that, it still remains a bit of a mystery to me, but I am trying to put it together. So let's talk about Saturn. For those of you that are interested in Saturn, everybody should be interested in Saturn, by the way. Saturn is the planet of structure and responsibilities and hard work. And Saturn can be a tough teacher for us. And usually, wherever we have Saturn in our chart is something that we're here to develop over time. And so we start from the ground up and we work on this our whole life, and it gets better and better over time. Saturn also rules time. So when we're talking about Pisces, a water sign, and the last sign of the zodiac, we're talking about Neptune. And Neptune is the planet that dissolves. It is our connection to spirit and things that we sense and feel, but we can't see. It's the things in the air and in the environment that we don't exactly understand, how they mix and come together. It's our emotions, it's our creativity. It can be a place where we are misunderstood. It can be about sacrifice and endings. It can be about illusions and delusions, lies, deceit, all of those things. But it can be the things too that are otherworldly. Our faith and our spirituality. So it's a very elusive planet, far out there, beyond all the planets. And, we don't really understand how it all works. Now, when we're talking about things that are mundane and things that we might see, Neptune and Pisces also governs things like viruses and water and air quality and how our bodies work on the inside. So there's something there too about science, right? And chemicals. And that includes things like drugs and alcohol. Neptune and Pisces is the place where we want to escape. And many of us we need to escape. I shouldn't say many of us. We all need a place to escape to, because the hardcore core reality of our existence and having to live in that all of the time is a lot of pressure, right? So we all find different ways to escape reality. Maybe some of us are writers or musicians. Some of us use drugs and alcohol to escape. Some of us are just able to live in that place in our mind where we don't really, where we can take ourselves out of reality, right? So this should be an interesting transit in Saturn. For Saturn, rather, and when I talk to other astrologers and when I've had readings myself in the past, because Saturn seems to be this, ominous place where we get worried. Worry is something that relates to Saturn, where we get worried about what's going to happen. You know, how do we get things to a workable place, or show up in a way that meets the purpose that we're supposed to be in, or be accomplishing in this life, right? And astrologers will tell me, they've told for years, it's like astrologers have said, work with Saturn. It's like work with any planet, right? That's how we learn to help ease through and live through the karma that is in our birth charts from an astrological standpoint, is learn to work with the planets. Those experiences, you know, they're kind of predestined, and they're going to come in, and we have these lessons to learn and this path to walk. And if we understand what some of that might be for us individually, we can actually create some of those structures ourselves, and gain understanding and gain maturity and experience and knowledge and all of those things purposefully, right? So astrology can help us do that, because it gives us a backdrop to study and learn and understand and cross-reference to help us lead a purposeful life, I guess, is a good way of saying it. So Saturn went into Pisces on March 7th, like I was saying, and Saturn is a 2.5-year tour in each sign. And so now here, June 2023, when Saturn is about to go retrograde, we still have 2 more years left in Pisces with the planet Saturn. So I think we've already seen a lot of interesting things come to light. And so when we're talking about Saturn and putting work in and creating structure around something that is intangible, around issues that are intangible, or things that seem confusing and elusive, it's like, how do you chase feathers, right? How do you grab droplets of rain and make some sense out of it? And that's kind of what the Saturn in Pisces is asking us all to do, wherever we have Pisces in our chart. As a collective, I think we're going to see things like water issues coming up. Here in Arizona, where I live, we've had a big, a bunch of news and situations going on in our local government about an unincorporated community whose water rights are now coming back to the table to be renegotiated. And this entire community has lost its agreement with the city to provide water. Well, there's an entire community there. So this is a thing, right? How do we get water? So water issues, you know, will there be, because Saturn is structure and also authority figures, will there be restrictions around things like water? I think about these things and I wonder what Saturn in Pisces is going to bring to our reality, right? Because that's what it will do. And they could be hardcore realities. So issues around mental health, substance abuse, drug and alcohol abuse, issues around the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry, chemicals in the ground that affect us, chemicals in our water, things like gases and fumes and vapors, and all of those things are ruled by Pisces. So I think we're going to hear a lot about what has happened and where we're going to be going and how we're going to fix, and what is the current and true state and supportive systems that are working in the background for all of these issues. And I think we're going to have it's an eye-opening time for those types of things. That's what Saturn will do, is open our eyes. This is something that I am very passionate about personally, not just because I'm having my Saturn return, but because I've spent my career in healthcare. And a lot of what I did was figure out processes and operations and make sense of all of the weird and hidden and strange things that went on behind the scenes, and find a way to bring things together so that there was some kind of working process. And, wherever we have, so I feel very strong about that part of this Pisces tour for tour for Saturn in Pisces, where it concerns me personally. And I think what we do is we find meaning, because that's also Pisces. We find meaning and purpose within our lives, and we have a responsibility when it comes to Pisces. And if you have a Saturn in Pisces, this is time coming around saying, well, now, there's a responsibility here to use your knowledge and your voice to speak out, because, we really have all of these things going on. It's almost like Oz behind the curtain. None of us really, really know, unless we've been on the inside and involved in some of these things, how things work, what's going on. And so now is the time where we might see some of those things. And, Saturn is icy and it's cold. And so it could be a lot of the cold, hard truth. Right. And people are, I think, what I hope to see is people taking, charge of their own healthcare, their own bodies, and questioning what's going in their bodies from, industries and pharmaceutical companies and the chemicals and the environment. And I know there are a lot of groups and people that have been for a long time very interested in those things, but we've had some very serious things happen over the last 3 or 4 years that have even further broken down some of those systems that support us in that way, that have sort of opened our eyes and made us realize that, what we're working with here is likely crumbling. There's no Saturn around any of this anymore. And it has to be rebuilt. And a lot of that has to do with Pluto's transit through Capricorn, Saturn ruled sign, and how we've been seeing the breakdown of a lot of these things for a long time. But now Saturn's in Pisces, it's like, well, we're really going to see it now, right? And so what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to work with Saturn to help and participate? Because Pisces and Neptune also represents rebirth. Right. So how do we rebirth some of these things? How do we help and show our compassion for one another and other people and everybody in the world? Because, that's also Pisces and Neptune is our unseen connection to one another. And it's very emotional. We've seen over these last years that, when it comes to being sick, in however that happens, and of course the pandemic showed us a lot, but that it knows no boundaries. And Neptune and Pisces knows no boundaries. It doesn't matter where you live or how educated you are or what you do. These are things that affect all of us, and hopefully have us sitting down and thinking about how connected we really are and feeling compassion for one another and working towards projects based on what our station in life is, what our knowledge is, working with people and projects to bring light to some of these things and help create structure. And there'll be a call to action for a lot of those types of things, I believe. And in one of my videos before, when I did the full moon and I talked about my experience there, in healthcare and healthcare management, but now my personal experience with healthcare and knowing from being on the inside that there's funky things that have always gone on, but now it actually happened to me. And of course, leaving the healthcare industry because I knew and that from the inside out, things were falling apart and I didn't want to participate anymore. I lost faith in it, Neptune. I didn't have faith in the system anymore and I didn't want to participate in it. It felt too heavy for me. And the same with drugs and alcohol. We have seen a drug epidemic in this country where, again, it knows no boundaries. It doesn't matter where you're from, what you're doing. This is accessible. And they talk about we'll just say the opiate addiction problems in our country is likely a lot of that starts with the healthcare system, prescription drugs, and dependency and people that have a need to escape and mental health issues and the drugs that we are prescribed for that. And what are the long-term effects? And we're seeing that across the board, drug and alcohol and mental health problems, no boundaries. People from all walks of life are seeing these things come into their families and affect them, their children. And the harder life is, more difficult we all find navigating life can be through some of these trials and difficulties, and now we've got inflation going on, it makes us want to escape even more. And some people escape into that drug and alcohol place, or, it affects them mentally and emotionally. And so you see how it's all connected, right? And I think we've been through collectively situations that somehow I believe were meant to be to bring us down to a level where we can feel one another's pain in some ways and situations, and motivate us to try and work together and make it our business to become educated and aware of what's going on, whether it's from losing somebody or being affected by something or someone or ourselves with drugs and alcohol, or being a victim of the healthcare system and not being able to access care, or being touched by mental health ourselves or in our society. And there are, and when it comes to like Saturn and structure and things like that, there are we have there's a business in this country around those things. And we've seen a lot of shady things happen within those businesses. And I think there will be an authority and an eye-opening over the course of the next couple of years when it comes to those types of things too. We have, my son and my daughter-in-law are both social workers. And, me being in healthcare for so long, it's like we watch these things and we see, and it's from the inside. And, we see even mental health where, the governments have given grants for people to open treatment centers and sober livings and things that are designed to help people. And now we're finding out, and all of this, like here in Phoenix, it's coming around where they're identifying that the people that have opened these centers didn't have backgrounds to do it, proper backgrounds, and they didn't have, or certifications, or the proper professionals to work with to actually create a good treatment structure for people. And they're getting paid for this. and they're not treating people. People are leaving these places worse than when they came in, or worse, they're not even there, or there's drug and alcohol and things inside of those places that are furthering their situations, making things worse. And those things are starting to come out. And then, of course, we have spirituality. And there's a reach for spirituality. Listen, we haven't had Neptune in Pisces since 2011. I want all of you to think about the last 12 years. And if you know your birth chart, go to the house where Pisces sits and tell me if where you were 12 years ago in that area of life is where you are now, and how you got there and why. And maybe you do know, but I bet that everybody can say, man, have things changed? Have I changed? Have my finances and my values changed? Has my mindset changed? Has my family life changed? Right? Has my work environment changed? My relationships, my connection to my spirituality? Is where I'm at now a place where I'm questioning what I always knew, or I'm starting to realize that I'm in the wrong place? It's kind of like down the rabbit hole, because Pisces and it can be a place where we get confused and we don't really know what to do or what's going on or how to process things. And it's just sort of like, oh, here today, gone tomorrow. But there's meaning behind that. And so we've experienced, Neptune has gone through and changed so many things, created illusions to put us in places that we were likely meant to be, but maybe not meant to stay. It's those kinds of things. But what do we do with all of that, right? And now we have Saturn coming into Pisces. And I think this is where we find out, pay attention, try to create some clarity, and work with this, right? Work with Saturn. It's tricky. It's really tricky. And then we've got creativity and music and all of those things that are being rearranged and changed, and I believe will become part of things like therapy, to help people that have mental illness, and which is difficult. And you see people speaking out and talking about their stories too. And that's what we need to be doing, because Pisces is we are really connected, and I think we'll start to see more and more of that connection, hopefully. But there is purpose and meaning behind all of it, all of the confusion, all of the muck. And that's what we're going into here with this tour for Saturn in Pisces. So I just think things are going to get really interesting, right? And I think this time around, my hope is that we do get involved. And we start to see all of the bleep, 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 the bleep, bleep, bleepery. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word on YouTube, so I won't. That's been going on, and getting involved and figuring out what we can do about it. When I was thinking about doing this video and how to explain Pisces and Saturn, and I was actually recalled a movie that I watched almost 20 years ago, and it's called What the Bleep Do We Know? And then there's a sequel to it called What the Bleep Down the Rabbit Hole. And it's basically sort of like a story documentary that talks about these things that are unseen, these confusing things, very Piscean things, and quantum physics, and how there is a sense to all of this. There is a structure to all of this. We just don't see it, and we normally don't understand it. Now, there are people out there who are tuned in and really tapped into these things that do understand it. And of course, you know, their station, depending on your station in life, you might be involved in the backdrop of some of these things and understand. But when I was looking at that movie to sort of refresh my memory, which by the way, I'm going to go back and watch, and I think this is a really good way to work with Saturn. If all of you are like, with my Saturn, like I was, watch that movie. It's called What the Bleep Do We Know? BLEEP. And you know, obviously it's not going to color in, you know, the entire picture for you, but it'll give you a sense of Saturn and Pisces, you know. It's very, very interesting concepts, but coming to the forefront now for us to look at and take responsibility for. And, you know, it can be a sad time too, if we're not ready for the realities that are coming our way. It can be a very sad and difficult emotional time for people, depending on where Saturn is transiting through their charts and what's going on in the Pisces area of their lives. So some people may opt out of the experience, and that's part of the type of thing that we see during significant transits in Pisces, and also with people that have heavy Pisces placements and have had you know, a path that has been very difficult for them emotionally. And so we could see, you know, heightened mental illness and things like suicide. And we could also see, you know, things and wacky, weird things going on with the weather and stuff like that. To me, though, those things, I mean, yeah, those things are okay, but they're not the things that I think about when I think of Saturn and Pisces. And, you know, I have Saturn in my 10th house. So that's the Capricorn house. It's the house of my career. It's the house of my responsibilities and my goals and my duties. And I have Saturn. So I've kind of spent my life trying to figure out how to make weird things work and being misunderstood, and actually, you know, understanding that part of my job is to sacrifice my reputation to try and do the right thing, and being okay with that. You know, you learn to live with your Saturn placement and how to work with it. And, you know, there's a choice. You can pull back and become icy cold and refuse to actually work with that, you know, distance yourself, you know, get stuck in your ways, or you can do something with it. But know that it isn't always, your Saturn placement isn't always the most emotionally fulfilling. It can be difficult. You can feel alone and misunderstood, and you can feel like you're giving and feel, you know, you can do things that feel really good about what you're doing if you feel like there's a purpose and, you know, it's good for everybody, and then find out that the others didn't understand that's really what you were doing. And, you know, there are all kinds of weird things can happen. So for me, you know, I found myself in a job that, and, you know, usually wherever we are in the Pisces part of our chart, we don't even really know how we got there. Sometimes we do. But like, I can say that I never envisioned, I didn't have a structure growing up, like what am I going to do for a living? What am I going to, you know, where am I going to go? What am I going to go? I had no idea. I just landed there. And, you know, right around 2010, 2011, is when things really started to take off, and I started making these really great connections, and I felt really good about my job, and I was exposed to a lot more than I had been in the prior 10 or 12 years. And I thought it was great. And now I'm realizing that it wasn't meant to be long-term, but there was a reason. But in the beginning, when I realized that, it was like super hard to articulate. It was super hard to digest emotionally. And it was super confusing as far as, okay, what's next? What now? And I think a lot of us have been at a place where it's like, well, what's the purpose? What's the meaning? And we're reaching for that. And I find it exciting, and it does get better over time, but it's a lot of contemplation. And there's a spiritual component. I think I started off adding that before, and I went off on this tangent, but there's a spiritual component in this transit of Neptune that has come obviously in Pisces further along, almost to the end of Pisces. I think right now Neptune's sitting at about 27 degrees, so quite a while. That's just kind of gone through and confused us and dissolved everything that we thought was real. And now we have Saturn coming in and saying, okay, now it's time to restructure and rebuild. And our heads are still ringing and soggy and wet, and we don't know what to do. But spiritually, it's a lot of the reason I think that there's a rise in all of us finding and questioning and learning about our own spirituality and what spirituality means. Obviously, there's so many people going towards spiritual practices and actually wanting to learn more and bring it into their practical, logical existence. That was me. I mean, I can see where Pisces and Saturn worked in my career, but I was always of the belief that everything and anything has a logical base. And I didn't have a spiritual practice or a close relationship with God or source. I wasn't raised that way. And didn't have anything bad to say about any of that. It was just sort of like my take on that was, it's just like not my thing. It's not for me, right? I'll stay down here on the ground, and what I see is what I get and all that stuff. And then you go through things, right? You go through things, and it changes you emotionally, and it makes you wonder, and you experience things that you can't explain and that aren't logical. And then you start to reach. And so a lot of people are doing that. And there's a lot of spiritual platforms out there, and places for us to go and learn things. And obviously, I've done a lot of that in the last 8 to 10 years with astrology, and others with things like, psychic development and tarot and all of those things that I would have never said 15, 20 years ago made sense to me. But it does. And to see the connections, interesting. So there's a lot there in terms of spiritual practice and opportunity for spiritual work. Spiritual work within structures like healthcare structures and behavioral health and things like that, but also just learning about spirituality and teaching it in whatever form resonates for you. So we see a lot of people having started businesses around those types of things, and it's great. We need this. I do think that just like anything else, there can be an element of opportunism when it comes to any business. And people think, how to make money, especially with all this passive income stuff. Think about that, Pisces, passive, that we have a lot of these things cropping up. And it's incumbent upon us to use our intuition and research who we reach out to and who we choose to work with. A lot of good folks out there, but I think there's a lot of people that have bad experiences too, which is not unlike any other any other type of work. It's the same thing. But I think that Saturn in Pisces is going to bring in regulation around that. some of that's probably good and some of that's probably bad. We saw a lot of that with healthcare, and, it tied the hands of a lot of doctors to do what they went to school to do and what was in their hearts, which was really just take care of people. And then they got wrapped up in all of this regulation and compliance stuff, and it was a little too much, right? And the same thing could happen in the spiritual world. So, I mean, the way to avoid that is to be on the up and up. If you don't know something, say, I don't know. Send them to somebody else who does know. Make sure that you've already adopted principles like confidentiality, and that it's coming from your heart, because it's now becoming a business, right? I mean, here I am too. I guess I could say that for myself, but it really is a spiritual practice. And for me, it's the first thing that has ever made logical sense enough for me to continue to study and prove to myself. But, maybe there does need to be a little bit of regulation around some of this, just in terms of morals. But I think we can check one another, right? It comes back down to anything else, healthcare, and what's in our water and what's in our land and what's in our food and all this stuff. It's up to, I think ultimately it's up to us to connect with one another and check one another and be good to one another. I know that sounds a little bit out there, right? Maybe that's a little bit of a dream. I said that a little too easy, and dreaming is also Pisces. But, with the 10th house in Pisces, I do dream that we can have careers and organizations that are doing the right thing, right? For the right reasons. It happened. So Saturn in Pisces means a lot to me, and I'm going to talk a lot more about it as we go. But I wanted to throw it out there now because I think it's significant. I see a lot of people changing and wondering and, having their heads spun around. And, working with Saturn is some of the best advice that I've gotten from some really good astrologers over the course of the years, and I am figuring out what that means, right? Find a way to work with Saturn. I'll do more videos and actually go through the signs and, give you some ideas. But if you know your birth chart, a good way, and usually people that are expressing and handling the Pisces area of their chart really well, is that they have a good, solid connection and understanding of Virgo, which is on the other side, because Virgo is all about practicality and making sense of things and being of service and putting it all together. Virgo is where you show your work, right? So like when you went to school, math class, it's like you had long division or you had algebra and you had to show your work. Virgo is where you show your work. And that takes the guesswork out of Pisces, but you learn to work with people, right? For people, Virgo. And that can, tapping into Virgo in your chart is going to be different for everybody, just like Pisces, but it's a way to create a stepping stone, a logical understanding, especially if you don't do well in that, uncertain place, to pull in Virgo energy to make sense of it and then balance it out. Astrology is about, when you use astrology to help you, it's about the opposition. The opposite energy is helpful. So reach for Virgo. And when I go through the signs, I'll do another video going through the signs. I don't want to run too long, going through the signs and explaining how to do that, how each sign is affected by this Saturn and Pisces transit, and how they can reach for Virgo, right? Whether it's on an angle, how is it affecting them personally? All of that good stuff. If you're curious and you're having a Saturn return, which is going to be between age 27 and 30, 57 and 60, get a hold of me. We can look at your chart and figure out your background and your history and what's in your birth chart and how you might be able to work with Saturn if you're having your Saturn return. I'm trying to become an expert at it, but it's like Saturn, Pisces is like out there. It's like, am I missing something? It could happen. So Saturn is going retrograde. Back to that. Saturn's going retrograde just hours after this upcoming new moon in Gemini. And Pisces and Gemini square. So it should be really interesting. And it's stationing beforehand. I think it's like 12 hours before. It's going to station retrograde, which means that's when it has stopped and it's going to start moving backward. And that's hours before this new moon. And then it starts to move backwards. But what's interesting is it's stationing at 7 degrees of Pisces, which is the degree that I covered and was relevant in the full moon in Sagittarius. And that was the degree of a girl blowing a bugle. So that's a call to action. It's news, it's information. It's like, whoa, check this out, take care of this kind of thing. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that it's going to station, and then we're going to have a new moon in Gemini, communication, within that hours to a couple of day period of time. This is all happening. And so it's interesting, the degree that a retrograde or planet stations to retrograde is significant. This is going to go back over that degree, and it's already been at that degree. So there's something there. And it kind of makes me feel like, usually retrogrades are the time where we digest internally or take a break, if it's Saturn, from whatever we've been working on with Saturn in that area of our charts or what's going on in our lives. So back from March 7th, it's where we kind of take a break and maybe we feel like there's not so much pressure and some issues or frustrations that have come up. We've, it seems to have leveled out a little bit and we're breathing a little easy, but retrogrades are talked about as being the time to actually continue the work. So that when the planet comes out of retrograde and starts to move forward, we're already sitting upright in our chair, right? But what's interesting about the fact that it's on that degree is that it kind of makes me feel like this is not going to be so much of a sleeper retrograde because whatever we were called to action for, whatever wake-up call or announcement was made, it's got to still be fresh in our mind and resonating with us, and maybe contemplative and trying to figure out what to do or letting the dust settle, and how did that settle emotionally? What was the effect? Am I thinking about that when it comes to other people, and what kind of action can I take, right? So I don't think it's going to be a sleeper retrograde. Retrograde shouldn't be anyway, but I think this is going to be something that's already there in our minds, and it will stay at the forefront, and we'll continue to work on it. Maybe it's more contemplative, and, with the new moon in Gemini, maybe that's connecting with other people, forming those ideas and having those conversations. So this could be an interesting retrograde. So yeah, retrogrades on June 17th. And I'll do a video on the new moon in Gemini and maybe talk a little bit more about that. And I will do another video on Saturn and in Pisces and the houses for each rising sign. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about with Saturn and Pisces and how I see this. maybe give a few tips on what you might do to start understanding that or working with it a little bit, and the things that we might see happen during this, during Saturn's time in Pisces. So if you have experiences already, or you're super familiar with Pisces, Pisces rising, I mean, Pisces rising, right? Pisces sun, Pisces moon, they know all of this. Anybody with Pisces placements is really going to feel this Saturn and Pisces. So not just if you're having your Saturn return, also anybody that has any significant points or personal planets in mutable signs will be having squares to this Saturn transit in Pisces. So they'll feel it too. So that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, as well as Pisces. And mutable energy can be a little bit kind of all over the place, but the good news is we can work with it. We just have to learn to go with the flow and let things settle, but it's movable. And people that have a lot of mutable energy are used to moving and thinking and processing and changing and adapting to things. And I think that's a lot of what we'll need to do to actually contain the water of Pisces, however that comes in, and make sense of it into some kind of structure and work with it, which is Saturn. So I'll do a video on that as well. But let me know if you have anything that has already come to you or you're working on, or some strange things going on that you've experienced in the Pisces area of your chart, and what you think and what your plans are. Saturn is plans, so always good to have a plan. And Virgo, right? Like, how do you pull in that Virgo? That's a conversation too, that and something I would like to hear. I have a stellium in Virgo, opposite my Saturn in Pisces, so that's in the 4th house. And so I do a lot of internal processing, and, you know, how I'm going to take action, lining things up. So I'm very much a process person, which is what I did in my job. But the funny thing is because Saturn in Pisces is at the top of my chart, so people didn't really see how all of that worked. And so it's like the perception might be that something's being held back, or maybe it's not the whole story, or it looks easier than what it is, but it really wasn't. It's like sometimes people would say, but I could teach it, right, Virgo? I could explain it. But when it comes to doing it, it was very interesting. My career life has been very interesting. And, you know, sometimes because Saturn's at the top of my chart, it's like, if you can't get moving quick enough, but I'm a Mars in Virgo. So it's Mars in order, it's Uranus, Pluto, Mars, and Virgo, exactly opposite my Saturn in Pisces. So a lot of times it would be just, let's get it done. And then people could be confused, or, you know, maybe I come off as being a little too strict or a little too this, but you know, it's interesting how Saturn comes out, right? Anyway, how to work with Virgo, right? And those of you with Virgo placements, you know, you understand how that works, and so now everybody's balancing that Pisces and Virgo. And I think this is really good practice for when the nodes go into Pisces and Virgo, which will be after we do Aries and Libra. But and that's another thing too. Anybody with a Pisces North Node or at Pisces nodal axis, so Pisces North Node, Pisces South Node, Virgo North Node, Virgo South, this Saturn is going to be hitting the nodes as well. So you'll feel this too. You folks will feel this too. So we have lots to talk about over the next couple years, and we can support one another. So I'd like to hear what's going on for you now. Drop it in the comments. If you'd like to have a reading with me, my information is down below, website, email. And we'll talk more about all of this, and I'll see you for the new moon. You'll notice that my background, I didn't put the fancy background. It's like, this is a video about Saturn and Pisces, so no illusions here. I'm going to do this right from my kitchen. So anyway, thanks for supporting. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'd like to build my channel to 1,000 subscribers. Maybe by the end of this year, if not by the first quarter of next year. I'd really like to work on doing that. I'm going to try really hard, and I appreciate all of your support so far. So I'll see you next time. Until then, may the stars forever be in your favor. Take good care.